I've spent more summers than I can count guiding tourists through the deserts of Joshua Tree. Most guides prefer the crowded trails around Hidden Valley or Barker Dam, places with clear paths and plenty of foot traffic. But I've always liked the remote corners, the forgotten routes winding through Pinto Basin. Out there, it's just you, the sand, the heat, and your instincts. No distractions, no mistakes. At least, that's how it always was before I took John and Marta out into the basin last July. We headed out from the Jeep at sunrise. Pinto Basin was already shimmering with waves of heat, the early sun promising a blistering day ahead. John, a Dutch guy in his 30s, looked fit and confident, already snapping on his hat and adjusting his sunglasses. Marta, quiet and German, moved carefully, checking and double-checking her gear. I'd guided hundreds of tourists, but these two felt capable, experienced. I liked that. Less babysitting, more adventure. The plan was a 2-day loop through the maze of dry washes east of Pinto Mountain. It's easy terrain to underestimate. People think deserts are empty and predictable, but every arroyo looks alike, and the heat can erase your tracks in hours. I navigated by landmarks most visitors never notice. Scorched rocks left by wildfires decades ago, twisted branches of dry ocotillo, certain rock outcrops shaped by centuries of wind. We hiked quietly that first morning, the rhythmic crunch of boots on sand filling the silence. By noon, temperatures pushed toward 100 degrees, so I led us to a shaded overhang where we rested, rationing our water. I glanced at John, who wiped sweat from his face with a steady hand. Marta sipped water slowly, carefully, her eyes scanning the horizon as if memorizing it. After our break, we pushed deeper into the wash, where the sand hardened into baked earth, cracked and flaking underfoot. As the sun rose higher, even breathing became an effort. I kept the pace slow, methodical, until something in the distance caught my eye, an uneven shape jutting awkwardly from a drift of sand at the base of a bluff. As we got closer, I felt an uneasy tightness in my chest. It was an old shack, half collapsed, roof buckling inward, rusted metal panels hanging loosely like broken teeth. It looked completely out of place, even in a desert that had swallowed whole towns. I'd walked this basin dozens of times, but I had never seen or heard mention of anything like this. "Russ, what is this?" John asked, already moving ahead for a closer look. I hesitated. No clue. Must be an old prospector camp. John circled it slowly, fascinated. Marta lingered back, quiet as always, studying the bones scattered around the shack. Small animal bones bleached white by the sun. Then I saw something else, partly hidden in the shadows cast by warped wooden planks. Longer bones, straighter and thicker than any desert coyote or jackrabbit. John nudged one with his boot. What animal has bones like this? I didn't answer right away. I knew bones. I'd come across plenty over the years, but these looked unsettlingly familiar, almost human. A cold feeling ran down my spine despite the heat. "Let's keep moving," I said finally, breaking the silence. "We don't want to linger here." John didn't argue, just glanced toward Marta and nodded. She was already backing away from the shack, her face tense. We camped several hundred yards away, near a narrow rise with good visibility in every direction. I picked the spot on instinct, as though the distance could somehow erase what we'd seen. Nightfall brought no relief from the heat. My tent felt like an oven, the air so still it seemed to press down on me. Sleep was impossible. I lay staring at the thin fabric ceiling, listening to John and Marta shift uneasily in their tents nearby. Then something else caught my attention. A soft rustling outside. My muscles tensed as I strained to hear better, expecting footsteps or whispered voices. But there were none. Just silence punctuated by my racing pulse. Unable to shake the feeling, I slowly unzipped my tent flap, peering out into the darkness. My heart nearly stopped. In the faint starlight, about 10 feet from our tents, a figure sat cross-legged, utterly motionless. It faced us, head slightly bowed, completely still. "Hey!" I barked, my voice cracking from dryness and adrenaline. I grabbed my flashlight, flooding the area with red-tinted light. The figure was gone. My breath came in short, rapid bursts as I scanned the area, expecting to see footprints or someone retreating into the darkness. But the sand was smooth, untouched, as though no one had ever been there at all. I stayed awake the rest of the night, hand tightly gripping my flashlight, ears straining against the silence, waiting for something that never came. Dawn finally came, offering thin comfort after the longest night of my life. The memory of that silent figure haunted me, but the morning brought immediate distraction. Marta's voice, edged with panic, snapped me out of my exhausted stupor. "Russ, look!" She held her hydration bladder, the water dripping steadily into the sand from a clean slash across its side. John stood beside her, holding his own bladder, similarly damaged. The cuts weren't ragged or chewed through by desert critters. They were straight and deliberate, clearly made by something sharp. My stomach tightened as I surveyed the campsite. Someone, or something, had done this silently, inches from our sleeping forms. I swallowed hard, forcing calm into my voice. "We'll redistribute my water. It's enough to get us back if we're careful." But then I noticed something else. Just beyond our tents, neatly arranged in a perfect grid pattern, thin sticks stood upright in the sand. Each was pushed several inches deep, impossibly precise. At each corner lay a small blackened stone, charred like charcoal. My pulse quickened as I stared, the pattern alien and unsettling. John cursed under his breath. "Someone's messing with us." "Maybe squatters," I offered weakly, though I didn't believe it myself. Squatters in the desert meant scavengers or prospectors, people who valued solitude more than anything. They wouldn't risk confrontation. Marta watched me quietly, reading doubt clearly in my hesitation. I brushed sand over the sticks with my boot, erasing the pattern, but the unease lingered, thick as the heat building with the rising sun. "We need to move," I said firmly. "We'll cut east and pick up a canyon I know. It'll bring us back toward the jeep. We'll be fine if we don't waste time." Neither argued. We packed swiftly, silence hanging heavy between us. Every shadow now felt ominous, each rock formation a possible hiding place for whatever had visited in the night. As we hiked, temperatures climbed relentlessly, the sun burning into our skin. My route followed narrow washes and old fire scars, but my mind raced with thoughts of the figure, the sticks, the slashed water. I had walked these desert paths countless times, yet now they seemed hostile, unfamiliar. Near noon, we paused briefly beneath a sandstone overhang, the shade barely enough to ease our misery. Marta passed John my water bottle without a word, each carefully rationing their sips. We had to keep moving. This desert had a cruel way of punishing the slow. After another grueling hour, Marta abruptly stopped, eyes wide. "Wait, where's John?" My heart plunged into a sickening drop. Turning quickly, I scanned the trail behind us. Nothing. He'd vanished without a sound, no struggle, no shout, not even a footprint out of place. "John!" I called sharply, fear edging my voice. Only the quiet vastness replied. Marta stood frozen, her expression shifting from confusion to terror. "Stay here," I ordered. "Don't move. Drink sparingly. I'll find him." She nodded mutely, eyes never leaving mine, pleading silently not to abandon her too. I jogged back down the wash, eyes scouring every crevice, every shadow. Then I noticed subtle signs, the scrape of boots, the bent limbs of dry ocotillo, faint impressions in the sand leading toward a narrow chute between two boulders. My pulse thundered in my ears as I followed the tracks. In the shadows, my foot kicked something metallic, hidden under a thin layer of sand. Kneeling quickly, I brushed it clear. A heavy length of rusted chain, half buried, bolted into solid rock. The other end had snapped, leaving it empty and useless. The sight sent chills through me despite the blistering heat. "Russ." John's voice startled me. He emerged unsteadily from behind a rocky ledge, his face pale beneath layers of dust and sweat. "You all right?" I asked sharply. He nodded shakily. "I thought I saw someone, watching from those rocks." He pointed vaguely behind him. Then everything went blurry. I passed out. "Heat exhaustion," I lied confidently, clapping his shoulder reassuringly. "Drink, slowly. We have to get back to Marta." We hurried back, my anxiety rising again when I didn't immediately see her. Then I noticed her pack sitting beside a small rock hollow. Approaching slowly, I called her name softly, trying not to startle her. Marta crawled out cautiously, eyes darting nervously toward the wash we'd left behind. "Something came," she whispered, voice cracking. "It crawled out from behind that ridge, covered in ash or dirt. I don't know. It didn't look right. It was crawling, Russ, like an animal." Her words froze my blood. No desert prospector or squatter would behave this way. No rational explanation fit. My hands trembled slightly as I helped her stand. "We go," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "Now." They nodded silently. We pushed northward toward the canyon I prayed would lead us back toward the jeep in safety. Every step felt like fleeing. Every shadow hid menace. Behind us, the sun began its slow descent, casting longer, darker shapes across the sand, chasing us forward, toward something I now feared waited patiently ahead. The canyon walls closed tighter around us as we moved deeper, sandstone rising steeply on both sides. My breath rasped in my throat, each intake of air hot and gritty. Marta and John kept pace behind me, their footsteps hurried and anxious. I felt the tension radiating off them. My eyes darted toward every shadow, every bend ahead. The slot canyon was familiar, at least I thought it was. But in this late afternoon light, it felt hostile, somehow narrower, darker. Still, it was our best shot at getting out quickly. We'd make it to the old jeep road and follow it back to the trailhead. I repeated that promise silently like a mantra, fighting to stay calm. I heard it first, a faint scrape of stone, then again, louder, closer. Marta stopped abruptly, gripping my arm, her fingers trembling. "Russ, did you hear?" "Yes," I whispered sharply, cutting her off. "Keep moving." John had slowed behind us, stumbling slightly from exhaustion. He wiped his brow, his eyes hollow with fatigue and fear. "We're being followed, aren't we?" I didn't respond, just quickened our pace. My heart slammed inside my chest with every step. Whatever it wasn't bothering to hide anymore. Each footfall echoed louder now, solid, steady, gaining ground behind us. I tightened my grip on the hatchet hanging from my belt, feeling the worn wood handle slick with sweat. "Move," I hissed urgently, almost jogging now. Then a shadow detached itself from above, dropping suddenly into the canyon directly ahead. A figure landed in a crouch, dust billowing around him. My breath caught painfully as he straightened slowly, revealing himself in full. The man was skeletal, filthy, streaked head to toe in gray ash and dirt, his cracked skin raw and blistered from weeks, maybe months, of desert exposure. In his right hand he clutched a sharpened piece of rebar, the rusted metal gleaming faintly in the dimming light. He said nothing, staring through narrowed, unblinking eyes. My skin crawled beneath his gaze. Marta's breaths came in rapid, panicked gasps behind me. John began to move backward slowly, stumbling over loose stones, his face a mask of disbelief. What is—" The man lunged forward without warning. No sound, no threat, just a sudden explosive movement. He swung the rebar in a vicious arc toward me. Instinctively, I raised my arm to block. Pain flashed hot through my shoulder, and I staggered sideways against the canyon wall, gasping. I twisted sharply, scooping a fistful of sand from the canyon floor. As the man rushed again, I threw it directly into his face, blinding him momentarily. He staggered backward, coughing violently, clawing at his eyes. It was my only chance. "Run!" I shouted hoarsely, shoving Marta and John toward a narrow gap behind us. They bolted, scrambling over the rocks, fear propelling them forward faster than exhaustion should have allowed. I followed close behind, each pounding step an effort, listening desperately for pursuit. We raced through twisting passages, scraping against sandstone walls, the echoes of our frantic breathing loud in the tight spaces. My mind blurred. Every turn looked identical. Just as despair began creeping in, I saw it. The rusted metal marker, half buried at the mouth of the canyon, signaling the start of the old jeep road. "This way," I shouted, leading them forward, legs burning with every step. We stumbled out onto open ground, the fading sun washing everything in a muted, surreal glow. Glancing back, I saw no one following, but I knew better than to slow down now. We didn't stop until the familiar shape of my Jeep came into view, parked exactly where I'd left it 2 mornings earlier. Marta leaned against the hood, sobbing quietly. John sank to his knees in the sand, coughing weakly. My injured shoulder throbbed sharply, blood soaking through my torn sleeve. None of us spoke. Later, when I filed the report with the park rangers, their faces showed confusion, skepticism, then quiet concern. They found the shack exactly where I described, but nothing else. No sign of the man, no tracks leading away. Just the strange, precise grit of sticks and that buried length of rusted chain, as inexplicable to them as it was to me. Eventually they called it an old prospector camp, dismissing my questions. But I knew they didn't really believe it, and neither did I. Something had been out there waiting. Maybe still was. I don't guide tours anymore. I spend most of my time indoors now, away from the heat, away from memories that won't fade. But in a small drawer of my desk, I keep the single rusted chain link I pulled from that desert wash. Proof that it all happened, proof that the desert has secrets it's willing to keep. For the last 6 summers, I'd guided backpacking groups deep into Colorado's Flat Tops Wilderness, a sprawling, remote area in the heart of White River National Forest. Unlike more crowded spots, the Flat Tops offered solitude, miles of wildflower-filled meadows, and trails untouched by casual tourists. This 3-day loop, beginning at Stillwater Trailhead, running along Skinny Fish Lake, across Devil's Causeway, and ending in Bear River Valley, had become my signature route. I knew it intimately, or at least I thought I did. On this trip, there were 6 hikers under my watch. 2 teenagers, Liam and Cody, full of energy but lacking focus. A couple from Boulder named Greg and Heather, both experienced but overly talkative. A quiet first-timer named Jordan, and a solo traveler named Tom from Missouri, who seemed confident enough. We had permits, clear weather forecasts, and no fire alerts. It should have been an easy loop. It wasn't. Midway through the 2nd day, under a blazing afternoon sun, we reached the junction that marked the ascent toward Devil's Causeway. I'd hiked this segment a dozen times, always admiring its dramatic exposure and sweeping vistas. But instead of the familiar weather-beaten wooden trail marker, we found a brand new sign, bright yellow wood etched with fresh black lettering. Trail closed, fire reroute to Deep Creek Basin. I frowned, feeling an immediate unease. Wildfire closures weren't unusual in July, but this felt off. I'd heard no warnings before departure and had meticulously checked every possible alert source. Still, as the guide, safety came first. Reluctantly, I motioned to the group. "Looks like we're taking a detour," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "We'll loop down into Deep Creek Basin and cut back around. It's going to add a few miles, but nothing we can't handle." The new trail was narrow and steep, descending into dense stands of spruce and fir. The shade was welcome at first, but the unfamiliar route quickly turned unsettling. Every guide develops an instinct, a feeling of something being off course, even before confirming it on a map. My internal compass kept telling me we were drifting away from our intended loop. Yet every quarter mile or so, a small red diamond marker, nailed precisely to a tree, appeared to reassure us we were headed correctly. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, we reached a small clearing, something unnatural catching my eye through the underbrush. I moved closer to investigate. Hidden among thick grass and overgrown shrubs, a rusted metal sign lay on the ground. Carefully, I lifted a corner, brushing away decades of grime. Pine Ridge Spur Trail, closed 1984. I glanced around, confused. This didn't match any trail I'd ever heard of. There were no mentions of this spur on modern maps. Unease spread quietly through me, but I kept it hidden. "What's that?" Heather asked, coming up behind me. "An old trail marker," I replied casually. "Nothing relevant. Let's keep moving." We continued down, setting up camp as twilight painted the valley in muted blues and purples. Everyone was quieter now, sensing something unspoken in the air. After dinner, while others settled around tents, I saw Liam staring fixedly into the darkness beyond the campfire's reach. "You okay?" I asked softly. His face was pale. I swear I saw someone crouched down in the bushes, just watching. I followed his gaze into the shadows. Nothing moved. No eyes reflected our light. "Probably just your imagination," I reassured him. "It's easy to see things out here." But even as I spoke, my chest tightened. I'd learned not to dismiss hiker concerns too lightly. Instead, I double-checked our bear hangs and kept my radio clipped close to my sleeping bag. I lay awake, listening. Around midnight, footsteps approached camp. Slow, heavy, purposeful. I tensed, reaching instinctively for my headlamp. "Who's out there?" I called, my voice slicing through the silence. The footsteps stopped. I listened closely, barely breathing. Nothing. No further sound came. Eventually, fatigue claimed me, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. Morning brought gray skies and tension. I woke before sunrise, counting heads silently as the group stirred. Liam, Cody, Heather, Greg, Jordan. No Tom. Instantly alert, I scanned the tents again. "Where's Tom?" I called sharply. Panic flitted across faces. Heather pointed nervously toward the trees. "I saw him walk off earlier, but I assumed he was just, you know." We spread out, calling his name. 20 minutes later, Tom stumbled back into camp from the opposite direction. He was filthy, mud streaked across his clothes. His expression was blank, eyes wide and confused. A vivid red scratch marked his neck, fresh and bleeding lightly. "What happened?" I demanded, trying not to sound accusatory. He shook his head slowly, blinking as if waking from sleep. I don't remember. I thought I heard something. Followed it. Then, nothing." The group exchanged worried looks. My stomach twisted sharply. Trails don't vanish. People don't wander into the woods and come back without memory. Something was deeply wrong in this basin. Quietly, I packed my gear and forced myself into a facade of calm. Whatever this was, I knew instinctively we had to move. Trails don't just vanish, but markers can be faked, hikers misled. "We're leaving," I said firmly. "Stay together, no wandering off. We're getting out today." Even as I spoke, I felt a gnawing dread, a sensation that the trail behind us was no longer there, that returning the way we came had ceased to be an option. We were being herded forward, guided by markers that shouldn't exist, into places long forgotten and left undisturbed. And something in my gut warned me. Whatever was guiding us deeper, away from known trails and into forgotten woods, didn't intend for us to make it out easily. I led the group out of camp, tension pulling tight at my shoulders. I moved us quickly down the narrow trail, ignoring the quiet murmurs and worried glances behind me. Tom stayed in the middle of the pack, eyes glassy and unfocused, repeatedly touching the fresh scratch on his neck. I'd seen hikers act strange before, exhaustion, altitude, dehydration, but never quite like this. The morning mist lingered, turning the trees around us into dark shapes on all sides. The red diamond markers we'd followed the day before were now conspicuously absent. I kept checking, hoping they would reappear, but the bark on every trunk was bare. It was as if someone had come overnight and carefully removed every sign we'd trusted. Greg quickened his pace, coming up beside me. His voice was tight, strained with forced calmness. "Emily, shouldn't we have hit the trail junction by now?" I nodded but kept my eyes fixed ahead, scanning constantly. "Soon," I lied, trying not to let my voice betray how lost I felt. "It's just a bit farther down." In truth, I didn't recognize anything around us. The landscape had subtly changed. The gentle ridges had become steeper, the forest denser. We had somehow drifted into terrain that bore no resemblance to the route we were supposed to take. Just as my anxiety peaked, Jordan stopped abruptly. Her breathing had quickened. "Does anyone else hear that?" Her voice was barely audible, fragile with nerves. We all froze, ears straining into the quiet around us. I heard it clearly this time. Slow footsteps tracking parallel to ours, maybe 50 yards away in the underbrush. They matched our pace exactly, stopping whenever we stopped. The rustling was heavy, methodical, and human-sized. Cody's voice trembled. "Something's out there." Could be wildlife, I said, attempting reassurance. Keep moving. It'll likely lose interest. But in my bones, I knew better. I'd spent too many seasons out here to mistake these sounds for an animal. Animals don't stalk patiently, matching a group's pace, pausing whenever we pause. We pressed onward, each step taking us deeper into unfamiliar ground. By midday, we reached a small clearing and saw another wooden trail sign ahead, weathered, with faded lettering that said, "Ridge Cutoff Established, 1969. My pulse quickened. Another trail I'd never heard of, never seen marked on any of my maps or guides. "This isn't right," I muttered, pulling my pack around and grabbing my laminated topo map. I ran my finger along every line, every elevation contour. Nothing even resembled Ridge Cutoff. Heather watched me nervously. "Emily? It's not on here." My admission hung heavy in the air. Greg stepped closer, voice low and urgent. "Then let's turn around and retrace. Find our way back to the main trail." I stared back toward the trail behind us, noting again the unsettling lack of markers. But Greg was right. Retracing was our only clear option. Yet, as I turned back toward the direction we'd come from, my breath hitched. The path we'd followed had become almost indistinguishable, blending seamlessly into tangled undergrowth. I swallowed hard. "Okay, let's head back slowly. Watch your footing, everyone." We trudged back, every step fueling my unease. An hour passed, then two, and nothing familiar reappeared. It was like the trail had simply vanished behind us. Liam's voice broke the oppressive silence. "Hey, look up there!" We all looked ahead, following Liam's pointing finger. The narrow path we'd been cautiously navigating rose upward along a narrow ridge, pinched between two steep drop-offs. On the ground, something glinted strangely beneath patches of leaves and pine needles. My gut twisted with dread. "Wait here," I said firmly, inching forward carefully. Kneeling down, I brushed away leaves and immediately recoiled. A crude trap stretched across the trail, carefully disguised. Barbed wire secured between stakes with sharpened sticks aimed directly upward. Whoever placed it clearly intended harm. Greg approached cautiously, his voice strained. "What is it?" "It's a trap." My voice sounded distant even to myself. "And it was meant for people, not animals." A cold silence gripped the group as I grabbed my trekking pole, jamming it into the wire to disarm the trap. Metal scraped loudly, sticks broke and scattered, but in the process, the carbon shaft splintered and snapped in my hands. I cursed quietly, tossing the broken pieces aside. Tom stared at the disassembled trap, color draining from his face. "Someone's out here," he whispered, "watching us." I scanned the shadows around us, feeling vulnerable and exposed. The midday sun had slipped behind thickening clouds, casting the forest in gray gloom. The darkness felt too early and too heavy. "We're moving," I said, my voice clipped with urgency. "No more breaks. We'll hike straight through the night if we have to. Keep your lights handy and stay close." We pushed onward, silent and tense, eyes constantly scanning the trees around us. Hours passed, marked only by ragged breathing and the faint crunch of boots on gravel. Near twilight, we reached another faded junction sign, the wood warped and splintered from decades of neglect. It read simply, "Trapper's Way 3 miles." The name was like ice water down my spine. Another non-existent trail, another ghost from decades past. Panic threatened at the edges of my mind, but I forced it away, locked it down. There would be time for fear later. "Stay alert," I whispered, barely loud enough for the group to hear. "We're not alone out here." In the creeping darkness, our headlamps flickered on one by one. The narrow beams cast jittery circles ahead of us, illuminating twisted branches and tangled roots. Each shadow seemed deeper, more ominous, and full of potential danger. The footsteps that had trailed us earlier had returned, always parallel, always just out of view, matching us step for step through the darkened forest. Whatever or whoever it was, clearly had no intention of letting us go. And now, we were moving deeper into territory we should never have entered, toward trails that had vanished decades ago, where only forgotten threats remained hidden, waiting patiently for hikers like us to wander too far off course. By dawn, Exhaustion weighed on each of us. Muscles burned, our feet blistered raw, and our nerves felt frayed to breaking. But then, at first light, the trees began to thin ahead. The dark, claustrophobic woods gave way to a narrow clearing that opened onto a ridgeline. Below us stretched Bear River Valley, familiar and beautiful, illuminated by the early morning sun. For the first time in hours, I exhaled deeply, feeling genuine relief. "There," I said, pointing down to a distant ribbon of gravel road cutting through the valley floor. "We just have to reach that road. There's ranger access there." Greg's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank God." I pushed the group forward quickly. Every painful step downward toward civilization eased the dread I'd carried since we'd first seen the reroute sign. Soon enough, we reached the road, wide, tangible, reassuringly familiar. Pulling my radio from my pack, I flicked it on. The static crackled, then a strong voice broke through, clear and firm. "White River Dispatch, go ahead." I nearly choked with relief. "Dispatch, this is Emily Blake, guide permit 338. We've had an incident, got rerouted into Deep Creek Basin off Devil's Causeway. We're out now on Forest Road 112, requesting immediate assistance." A brief silence then. "Copy that, Emily. This is Caleb with Search and Rescue. You're saying Deep Creek Basin?" "Affirmative," I replied. "A new reroute sign was posted yesterday morning at Devil's Causeway Junction." There was hesitation on Caleb's end. His voice returned cautious. "That's strange. Sit tight. I'm on my way." Within an hour, Caleb's Forest Service truck appeared, tires crunching on gravel as he slowed to a stop beside us. He climbed out, looking serious but confused, a binder of maps and paperwork tucked under his arm. I recounted the previous day's events in detail: the strange sign at Devil's Causeway, the old trails we'd stumbled upon, the wire and stick trap, Tom's disappearance, and the mysterious footsteps that had shadowed us through the forest. Caleb's expression darkened as I spoke. He flipped urgently through his binder, maps rustling under his fingers. Finally, he looked up sharply. "Emily, there's no reroute through Deep Creek Basin. There hasn't been in years." "That's impossible," I said, voice edged with disbelief. "We saw the sign. It was brand new. Red diamond markers led us the entire way down." Caleb shook his head firmly. "We pulled every sign out of there decades ago. Nobody's been authorized back there since." My stomach twisted. "I'll take you back and show you," I said. "We left the markers and the trap right where we found them." Caleb nodded reluctantly, visibly troubled. "Show me." Leaving the group safely behind at the truck, I retraced our path back up the ridge alongside Caleb. I felt confident as we neared the spot where we'd found the trap. Yet my confidence vanished instantly as we emerged onto the narrow ridgeline. No trap, no markers, no broken sticks, no disturbed earth, just dense underbrush, untouched, appearing as though no human had disturbed it in decades. "It was right here," I insisted desperately. "I disarmed it myself, snapped my pole in the process." Caleb stared at the spot quietly, eyes searching for any sign of our presence. He shook his head slowly, clearly perplexed. "Emily, nothing's here. Hasn't been for years. This is just an old logging path, reclaimed by the forest." We moved farther up the trail, toward the junction marked Trapper's Way. But as we reached the spot, my pulse quickened again in confusion and dread. The warped wooden sign we'd seen only hours before was gone. All that remained was moss-covered ground and a faint indentation of a trail long abandoned. "I don't understand," I murmured, my voice small, shaken. "They were here." Caleb studied me closely. "You sure you're not just tired, Emily? Fatigue can make anyone see things." I bit back frustration. "I know what we saw. The entire group saw it. Those trails, the trap. It was real." He nodded gently, leading me back toward the truck. "Let's get everyone back to the ranger station and get you hydrated and rested. We'll talk more there." Hours later, showered and sitting at a desk inside the quiet ranger station, I flipped through Caleb's binder of official trail maps. Page after page, year after year, confirmed exactly what Caleb had said. Each route we'd followed, the Pine Ridge Spur, Ridge Cutoff, Trapper's Way, had been decommissioned, erased from maps decades earlier. Caleb watched me carefully, folding his arms. None of those trails have been marked or maintained since the 80s. Nobody would bother rebuilding trails that deep. There's no reason. Then who placed the sign at Devil's Causeway? I demanded. Who nailed those markers on the trees? And who built that trap? Caleb's eyes moved past me, fixed on a faded photograph pinned to the wall behind my chair. I turned, following his gaze. It showed a smiling group of rangers posed near an old cabin, a sign behind them reading Deep Creek Ranger Station, 1979. He sighed quietly. Emily, some parts of this wilderness have stories even older rangers don't like revisiting. Trails vanish here for a reason. Maybe some things out there aren't meant to be found. I shivered involuntarily, looking away from the picture. Are you saying someone lured us into that basin? He hesitated, shaking his head. I don't know what to believe, but whatever it was, you're lucky you got out. I stared blankly at my folded hands, thoughts tumbling chaotically. I knew I'd never return to the Flat Tops wilderness, never set foot again on those paths I thought I knew so well. Trails don't vanish without reason, and if they do, maybe it's because the forest is hiding something it wants forgotten. Maybe Caleb was right. Maybe some paths really aren't meant to be found again.